Call informational meeting of the Washington Central School Board to order at 5:02 p.m. We wanted to start with just a very quick introduction. I'm just going to let you know what's going to happen first, and then we'll do a quick welcome. This is an informational meeting to make sure that all of our voters are informed and are able to ask the questions they need, and for us to hear from you. There is not a time limit, so we are all just going to have to keep each other accountable. We have about an hour and a half with all of you, so we're super excited about that. We also have people online, so we're going to have Stephen and I might take about 20 minutes, the most, 15 minutes, with a very quick presentation, and then we'll move right into Q&A with all of you. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So what I just wanted to say is that, I know that all of this has been really hard. I hope that we can tonight just sit together in community and come together as one community, be really respectful to each other. I know that emotions are hard, but let's work ourselves as we are sitting here holding space for all of us together. I know that the setting is like you and us, but the point, because we're going to have a little board meeting later, the idea is that we're all doing this together. We are answering questions and listening to each other through this process, and I know that it'll be really hard to make everybody happy, but we are really, everybody sitting in this board really cares about kids, and everybody sitting with the community really cares about kids too, and our administrators and everybody really cares about kids. So I would just ask you to be really kind in your comments. There's no, we care as much as you care, so try to keep the questions about the school and what your questions are specific to the configuration, and let's try to not attack anybody personally. We are all here for you. And with that, I'm gonna give it to our superintendent today. And I'm just gonna say again, I just came back from a conference in DC, and like we have so much, and we're so lucky to be gather here tonight, and what our other schools and are experiencing right now is like really traumatic, and I just want you to just think about how we are all interconnected between the state and the nation as we are looking at this. We're here all for public education for all our kids. So with that, Stephen.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody that's here tonight. I shared online, and there are copies in the back of a letter that was earlier this week. I tried to give some additional information and just outline some things, so that's available to folks. And then I have a short presentation that I'd like to be able to share that'll give us a little background information. And Spencer, would you mind if you can turn the screen so that folks in the audience can see it a little better? Thank you. Is that, can you see that okay? Okay. Great. And so, what I want to just do is make sure that we understand how we grounded some of our work as we got to this point in time. So several years ago, the school board embarked upon a revision of their strategic plan, and as part of that process, worked with the community, the schools, students, staff, and we developed our, first our core beliefs as to what drives our work, and those can be seen here as humanity, justice, community, and belonging, rigorous curriculum and instruction, well-being, transparent and responsible leadership, and community engagement and relationships. And so that's the work that we started several years ago, which then led us to three major goals of our strategic plan that were to build and nurture a culture of well-being and inclusivity, and challenge, empower, and engage each student through evidence-based instruction and curriculum, and foster and commit to responsible leadership that engages the community and communicates transparently. So those were the overarching goals for that that led a lot of our work. And so this has been built out of work that we have been doing since, if we go back on our website, you can see these actual studies, but in 2010, there was a study that was done about governance, and that one specifically between Doty and Rumney, on what these communities were looking at and facing at that point in time. The 2014 study, the WCSU efficiency study, was a predecessor to Act 46 that was looking at how as an SU could we create greater efficiencies in our program. And then more recently, in 23-24, the board created a configuration committee. This last school year, the board voted not to reconfigure at that time, and the board constituted a new configuration committee that was formed by members of the community and board members. And that configuration committee is the one that has recommended the current model that the board approved most recently, and that essentially our townspeople are voting on the results of that configuration. And so one of the questions that's come up regularly is what other configurations were considered. There were other options considered throughout both configuration studies during this time. Everything from maintaining the current configuration to looking at the 3 pre-K-5 elementary schools, the model that you've seen proposed now. We also looked at 2 elementary schools and 1 early learning center. That one was highly popular, but transportation became a constricting factor on that for us to be able to do that. We did look at what does 1 pre-K-5 elementary school look like. We didn't have the facilities for. And we also looked at what about 4 pre-K-5 elementary schools. And what that showed us was there are very few differences between that and that and the 5 elementary school model that we currently have in terms of savings or configuration for our students. Most recently, we looked at maintaining the current configuration in the 3 pre-K-5 elementary school model. We also did very quick look at what if we did a pre-K-3 schools and grade 4-6 schools. So what if we had something like Doty being pre-K-3 and Rumney being a 4-6 school? That presented its own problems around transportation and still had difficulties with us in terms of utilizing our buildings fully. And so that one was also discounted, which is what brought us to the model that we have of 3 pre-K-5 elementary schools and eventually moving the grade 6 to U32 so that is a 6-12 school. That would occur not next year, but the following year. Some enrollment numbers, you've probably seen variations of this. We use a group called NESDEC to review what are the future numbers for us, what's the prediction. So in the last 10 years, we've had a 14% decline in our population, and in the next 10 years, we're predicting an additional 14 to 16% decline. I went back and looked at 10 years ago, what did NESDEC predict for this current time period? So how accurate were they? They actually predicted us to have more students than we have 10 years ago. And so we've lost more students than they predicted a decade ago. Not a whole lot more. I don't want that to be like they predicted that we would have a 5% decline and we had a 14. They estimated us to have about a 12 to 13% decline and we had a 14 on that. And so we know that our numbers are still dropping and continuing to drop. It's not equal across all schools as to what percentages are changing, but across the district as a whole, this is our trend. And so when we looked at creating a new model, we developed criteria around our programming. And so this proposed model was brought together by looking at what programming do we want, what staffing do we think is appropriate for our schools, how do we want to allocate our resource, and how do we want to utilize our facilities. So those were some of the criteria that the board set initially. And then we looked at some things that over time, historically, not just the board, but the community has asked for, are things like full-time school counselors, nurses, and library media specialists, making sure that we had band and chorus in our music programs. Our transportation, we wanted to make sure that we were staying as close to a 45-minute maximum ride for our elementary and 60 minutes for our middle and high school students. We early modeling on that shows us no more than a 5-minute increase to some of our rides because we can reconfigure the way that our transportation occurs. And another thing that we did earlier in this year is we looked at how could we expand our pre-K programming. The earliest recommendations were we wanted to go to more of a full day, 5-day-a-week pre-K model. our finances do not allow for that. So what we have proposed within this overall budget and structure is expanding to 5 half-days. Currently, we're just 4 half-days. So doing 5 half-days a week with options for full-day care through our community connections. So these are some of the additions that we were able to do in this budget. It also, our educational programming criteria, we wanted to make sure that we built a stronger multi-layer system of supports for our students. That's students with additional needs, either behaviorally or academically, and provide opportunities for classrooms with multiple instructional groupings, diversity across as many demographics as possible, and the ability for our kids to have diversity of thought within their classes. And so that was some of the criteria we looked at. We also wanted to make sure that our curriculum would be designed for grade levels and specific multi-grade configurations. So we wanted to make sure that we had enough students and the right enrollment to be able to do grades 1 and 2 classrooms, grades 3 and 4 classrooms, and grades 5 and 6 classrooms when we needed multi-grade classes, as opposed to having a variety of those, like a K1 class or a 2-3, just simply because of enrollment. So we were trying to stabilize that because our curriculum could be stabilized as well. And that's really that creating those consistent configurations year to year is what that really is. And giving our teachers an opportunity to work in grade-alike teams. Some of our teachers work in isolation right now. There are no other grade-level partners for them. And so we wanted to see can our criteria and can our program do that? And that's why this proposal is the one that we put forth. There were also considerations around special education services, making sure that we could provide small group in addition to one-to-one, depending on what the students' needs were, and we could specialize some of our service delivery. In some of our schools right now, we only have one special educator, and so that special educator has to serve all grade levels and all student needs. If there were 2 special educators in a building, they could specialize a little bit so that each one of them could just go a little deeper in their own knowledge in that. And we could concentrate our specialists. We have specialists that travel between buildings right now, and having fewer buildings makes it much easier to deliver those services. We're not spending our time paying for their travel. They're actually working with kids. We also, as part of this, really looked at our middle grades programming. Being able to allow for our specialization of their teachers, middle grades endorsements. We have very few people right now that are middle grade endorsed, but we want to encourage that as part of a stronger 6 through 8 middle school program, and giving our 6th graders more access to co-curricular activities, more specific middle school programming, and really efficiently use our space and our facilities for us to be able to have the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at U32 along with the high school. And then this will allow us to build some additional programming for them, which allows them to have just more flexible pathways. There's just more opportunities. We just have a larger program available to kids. And the 6th grade is a good time for them to come and join with the middle school program. That's a typical middle school grade level. And so the last part of this was the work that we've started recently with community schools. And so what we've been trying to do is build in more community school work. The core philosophy behind this is that it's student-centered and collaborative, that it helps us remove barriers to access to our schools, and it's a local focus for us. So if we have schools with our community school coordinator working with them to provide greater before and after school opportunities for our kids, and being able to tie our schools more directly to the community, that is just a better opportunity for all of us. And so we've really tried to build in that community school work. Some considerations that I think that we have to hold in mind, not just for now, but in the future. We're looking at whether or not budgets will be capped in the future based on the foundation formula. That's work that's going on in the legislature right now. They're looking at capping. Ours would be capped at about a 2% increase for next year should that legislation go through. This year's budget was over 7% increase in our per pupil spending. That was the per pupil spending increase. Our actual spending increase in our dollars from this year to next year was only 0.1%. So we have very small overall increase in our spending, but with our drop in student enrollment, it's an increase in the per pupil cost. We also are looking at the small schools legislation. The work that was done in Act 73 around that required the AOE to provide definitions for what is small by necessity. That's both sparsity and size that they looked at. Our schools do not currently meet the definitions that's in their draft document, and so when we move to a foundation formula, the funding that would be appropriated to schools because they were small by necessity wouldn't be available to us under the current draft definition on that. And so we do not meet that and would not be eligible for that funding. And then our enrollments are projected to continue declining. We are still looking at a loss of students over the next several years. That's going to require us to continue to evaluate our programming and making sure that we are creating sustainable structures in the future. Other constraints that we always have to remember is that time, space, staffing, and just overall sustainability are constraints that we must look at every year. So the school day dictates how some of our activities occur. The size of our classrooms can dictate a lot of that, and the limits in the size of our schools. We are very fortunate that we have space in our schools, so if we bring together communities, that space is there for our kids. Our schools are built to support many more students than they're currently attending. And so we're very fortunate there. And staffing is something that we have to constantly consider. We have a dwindling workforce in education, and we also want to make sure that our people are not split up so much between schools that it's difficult for them to do their jobs. And so those are constraints that we always look at. And then there's some potentials that we have. So if we have combined schools, there's the ability for more recreational sports for our elementary kids, expanding some of our before and after school care because we can concentrate it in a few places. We're looking at health clinic options through our community schools work. And can we still continue to provide community space? If we are closing buildings, we want to make sure that we explore both additional educational uses for the district so that that expense of the building isn't placed upon the communities, but we also want to make sure that that space is still available for the communities to use on a regular basis. So a little bit of our budgeting went to making sure that our custodial staff is still available for any buildings that might be closed for us. So that kind of gives us a quick look at, how did we get here? What was our history on all this? I know that there are a lot of questions that are probably more important for us to get to in addition to this, but I really appreciate everybody taking a moment for us to share this. And I'm going to end my share.
So we're going to open it now for questions. I know we had some that came after we did the welcome. There is no time limit on the questions, but we are in community for an hour and a half, so you guys can, help us make sure that everybody has a chance to ask the questions they need. We have a couple of microphones available, so raise your hand. We do have a couple of people online, and you would see, so we'll go back and forth. So please raise your hand, and we'll move right into questions. Sophia, I want to come forward so that we can hear you. Sorry, so we're going to start with one online. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Are you starting online?
It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I read a recent FAQ where I was really dismayed to see that the response to a question about how community impact studies, which I believe were part of the requirement of the configuration committee, how those were carried out. And the response to that question completely bypassed the question and said that you, the board or the administration, view community as being defined by the entire district and the overall well-being of the district, which was not the question. So my question now is what due diligence was done in this plan to acknowledge a massive impact, potential impact on these two specific existing communities, which are not the same as the entire district community. What studies were done and what findings were found by neutral parties that gave actual data that would fulfill that requirement for community impact studies, both on cohesion of communities, property taxes, property values, and so on, because that response in the FAQ did not respond to any of those things. It simply redefined what you consider a community to be.
Sure. Why don't we break up the question if I'm hearing you, and please correct me if I'm not hearing you right. So I'm gonna try to break up the question in three pieces. I'm gonna lean in some of my board members. I'm gonna let Zach talk about taxes. I'm going to lean on Daniel a little bit on this question too, because he also helped me with the frequently asked questions, if that's okay, Daniel. And then I'm just going to start with the first part as our role as a board. So our role as a board is to make sure that we are educating all our kids in our district, right? And we see our kids in Doty as one of our, one of our communities within our larger community, right? So the care that we took in that part is to make sure that all of our kids in our district, including Doty kids, right, have what they need in order to succeed, and that they're able to have, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, the programming that they need, the consistency that they need, be able to have access to pre-K and all of that. Considering that, we did not do any specific studies on beyond the role of the board, right? We have done an efficiency study in 2014 of what would be good for our district as a whole. We took into consideration what are the resources that we have right now in order to serve all our kids, and you've seen the criteria. But as far as doing a specific study on economic impact, we did not hire somebody to do a specific study on economic impact in our district.
Did you take into account any of the existing research and the many papers that have been published about specifically this issue about economic impact on communities from school closures at the elementary school level?
I want to say absolutely. I'm going to lean so I'm not the only one speaking. Daniel, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I
Thank
think as a committee and as a board, I would say that we did not. I think that an important, I reflected a lot on Andy Shapiro's critique of the configuration committee's process, and I think some of his arguments were fair. I think others ignored the fact and the focus of that configuration committee as a committee convened by the school district, by the school board, to focus on the well-being of the students. And it's not to say that community well-being, community health aren't important, and we brought community members into that committee so that community perspective would be amplified, and we would have more perspectives from community. But I think personally, I looked at a lot of economic impact data and a lot of anecdotes from different districts, and I don't feel like there's unequivocal evidence in any direction. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I think that, one thing I've seen, property values has been discussed quite a bit. One thing I've seen is that property values aren't adversely impacted over a long-term period by the loss of a school. But I also feel like the geography of the district, the geography of the schools, the geography of the towns that share schools makes a huge difference in whether or not the economy is affected, whether or not town cohesion, community cohesion is affected. And then I'll just say really briefly for myself, on a personal level, it may come out as disingenuous, but I do feel like the 5-town and really a 7-town community that represents Central Vermont is sort of my community, because I can't get all of my needs met in the town of Calais, and I can't get all my needs met even in the towns of East Montpelier and Calais. And so for me, that is the community. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about community impact, it's not only economic impact. Children are part of community. They're embedded within community, specifically in a very specific place, and removing them from community has an impact on their sense of well-being, especially when children live in a town that has a completely different socioeconomic profile than the next town over, and there's a very clear and very known history of problems between those two towns in terms of economic identity and how children are identified in that way. And so it's not just economics, but I'm just confirming, hearing that you have not done any studies on the impact beyond just educational outcomes, but the impact on children of being removed from their communities. And so that's what I'm hearing, and I also just want to confirm that well, it was my understanding that it was part of the charge of the configuration committee to either carry out studies regarding that impact, or at the very least to consider it through research. And I'm hearing that that did not take place beyond personal research. Is that correct?
I think that's an accurate and fair statement in terms of what the configuration committee did. I wouldn't say that the charge was to do studies on that, but it was a factor that should have been considered more than it was, because we did not, I don't believe, had any in-depth discussion about the potential impact on the towns that were being asked to close their school. And we certainly did not do any of the socioeconomic disparity that you're talking about right now in terms of the kids. But what we have heard is that I think the staffing, we're going to really work hard on that. And no, that's, maybe a poor way of saying it, but we didn't do any in-depth studies that you're asking about.
Seth?
I just want to reflect on sort of Daniel mentioned that we do take seriously information that we receive. We do read it. I want to reflect a little bit on some of the information that was sent to us, actually starting a couple of years ago from residents of Worcester. We've received it from residents of Alice as well. It's an article titled, "What Happens to a Community When a Rural School Closes." I just want to read the first couple of paragraphs, and then I want to reflect on some of the research that it shows. It says, Osaka, New York. In a town without a coffee shop, the former elementary school building in this small Adirondack community has become a gathering point of locals. A group of men gather each morning for coffee in the school kitchen, leaving donations in a jar under the counter. Down the hall are the town offices, including a classroom that serves as traffic court on Monday evenings. The former school library now serves all residents, offering books on the honor system. An early elementary classroom has become a fitness center. This article includes a lot of very inflammatory headlines about the death of towns when the school closes, and not a single person that they quoted said that the sense of community was decreased because of the lack of the school. They did say things were changing already and that continue to change. But when I look at the actual information that was submitted to us about this, it really didn't, it really said that these places did a good job of saying, how do we use our former schools as a way of building community where there, in this case, in a town where there wasn't. And I think this is a case that has a lot less going for it than Worcester does in terms of the ability to build community. It also did cite some of the economic research. There was a seminal study by Thomas Lyson, and this is where that really big headline number of a 25% change difference in property values comes from. And what Lyson did is he just compared property values in villages with schools to property values in villages without. That's it. When you do that, you've got to be really, really careful that the two things you're comparing are equal. And he did look at that and discovered that actually there were some real differences, and then attributed the difference, and a responsible researcher would look at that and say, we've got a problem here. We don't know if this difference is because of the school or because of the other thing. And not only does Lyson not do that, but he actually attributes those differences to the school, rather than to say, ooh, maybe we should be worried. Further on the same article, they cite another study by a researcher named John Sipple, who tried to repeat this, and came up with absolutely no difference with the same results. And so, like when Daniel says, like, we looked at this and we really don't find any convincing evidence, it's because when we have read this stuff, we have looked at the economic impacts, and the things that have said this is, have shown really negative impacts have just fallen apart. Because the last thing I do want to say, because I've been talking a while, I'm sorry, is the one example we have close to home is Roxbury. And you may have heard that Roxbury is facing really significant property tax increases this year. They're in the district of Montpelier. Roxbury is looking at it's changed. The numbers changed around a bit. You may have heard an older number. They're now looking at the 30% increase for Roxbury, only 3% for Montpelier. That difference is entirely driven by difference in property values, and specifically that property values significantly increased after that district decided to close the school. And so while property values are complicated and we certainly can't attribute this to the school closure, it's really, really hard to believe that this is a community that people are saying, oh, we want to get out of this community, when their property values have gone up so much right after the school closed.
I just want to correct, there is another study that I can send you separately that was done very thoroughly that did show a bare minimum of 6% decrease in property values after a community specifically loses its school, not just comparing communities with and without schools. So I'm happy to send that to you. And I just want to say, since I have to leave early and I want to leave time for other people, I just, as you go forward, whatever the outcome of this vote is, I'd like you to really reflect on how quick so many of you are to defend your positions. You are backed by a lot of organizational power, and you are sitting in different positions of power than the people in these two communities. I really encourage you to lead with empathy and with questions and with bridge building rather than this quickness to defend where you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Any other questions? Yeah, here, now we have a mic. Can we use it now?
Thank you. Thank you so much for making the big drive out to this end of the county. Appreciate it. As you know, I've been critical about the allocation model, the $8,100, the LTW ADM that was used to come up with the funding level for this school. There wasn't enough, right? So if we keep the school open, we're looking at really pretty significant cuts to teachers because there isn't enough funding based on that model. I did some research in the state database for enrollment, and 20 years ago, Doty had 65 students. 10 years ago, they had 63 students. This year, they have 63 students. It's the most stable school by far in the entire system. And my fear is that if we close this school, we move the kids to Rumney, Rumney is going to be in the exact same position that Doty is today. Based on that allocation model, they're going to be facing a 25 to 30% cut in staff next year because they will be the smallest school by far in the district. So there just won't be, the problem isn't being solved unless we change that allocation model. And I know that, in your letter that you just sent, you said that the 49% of the budget that's district-wide is mandated and essential, and they can't be cut. So if the school system is stuck at 51% and enrollment is declining year over year across the district, it seems like this model punishes the smallest school over and over and over again because the largest schools will have all the funding they need for all of their programs. It's only the smallest school that won't. And I just wanted to, is there any opportunity to take another look at that funding model so that we know that if our kids do go to Rumney,
that there's a chance that they're going to have adequate staff based in comparison to the rest of the district?
I think the way that I would try to address the funding issue that you're trying to bring up is that when we allocate funds per pupil, and not just the body, that, you know, one-to-one
weighted,
students,
right.
right? We also have, there are state categories of additional need that add to that student body, right? So that's what creates that long-term weighted, right? And so when we allocate funds to a school, it has to, it looks to cover first the classroom level instruction. That's what we consider a layer 1 and 2 instruction, and some of those additional pieces that go along with that, like what's the ratio of kids to a school counselor, to a school nurse, those kinds of pieces as well. The additional funds that go to a school then beyond that base layer is to help with their additional supports that kids need. So when we have budgeted, last year and this year we've used this allocation model, we have been able to fund our schools based upon those student needs, and we balanced the spending across our schools so that they're getting the same programming. So just because a school like East Montpelier may have more students in it, it doesn't mean that they get substantially more funding percentage-wise to have additional programs that a school like Doty or Calais would have. What we're seeing is we're essentially in a spot now where our declining enrollment means that it's hard to provide those services when we spread them out across multiple schools. So we've reached a point in some of our schools, like Doty and Calais, where the number of students doesn't support some of the things that we've been asking for as a community. So full-time nursing, full-time school counseling, those are things that we have consistently been asked for within the community, and a small school does not have the ability to support that with a smaller number of kids. And I would also just add in is that there are cases in some of our schools where the needs of a few students is high, and so we don't put that burden upon the school. That's what's part of that centralized services, so that we're not spending an exorbitant amount of money on any one need for a school, so that they can have all of those layers of service and support for our kids. And so that's some of what our centralized services. So when we say mandated services, we're talking about things like special education that are required by law. We're talking about things like transportation, and we're talking about things like our operations and maintenance of our buildings. So to keep the lights on, keep the heat on, those kinds of things. We can't cut back on how much we heat a building. We could decide at some point in time that we don't want our buildings as clean as they are and have less custodial services. We could change the amount of time that we want kids on a bus and have longer transportation, but fuller buses. So there are decisions that we can make to try to put more money into the schools and less in centralized services. But we constantly look at how can we reduce those central services. But for the most part, it's things that go to students: food service, transportation, keeping the building open and operating, special education. Those are those centralized services. They account for the vast part of that budget. Mm-hmm. And so,
Daniel.
Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, I think it was at it was either the November or the December meeting, we talked about the ratio of district-wide services expense to school-based services expense. And I think what you told us was that in last year's budget, the ratio was 56% district-wide services to 44% school-based services. And am I hearing also that now it's 51 to 49%?
Exactly.
Can you-
give me a mic.
Can you, Mark, can you give her the mic?
sorry.
Just bring it over. Thank you.
So our draft one was 5644.
Okay.
And it was pretty,
In the other
It was-
direction, you mean?
yeah,
School-based services. But I thought you had said that,
no, centralized was 56, school-based was 56, centralized was 44. We realized pretty quickly that that just wasn't going to fund everything that we needed to for centralized services. And the centralized services also encompass all the technology that supports students. When we're talking about central office, all of our central office personnel support our schools and our teachers in different ways, including our human resources and our payroll, our finances, curriculum director, our student services director. Everything in our centralized services supports our schools and our students.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to make it clear, the district office is part of district-wide services.
Correct.
Yes. And so, you know, I won't go on, but, you know, we're stuck in a situation here where we have a $43 million budget and almost 1,200 students. That's $35,800 per student. It's a lot of money per student. I think until we start chipping away at anywhere we can, at any kind of an overhead expense, we're just going to get to the point where school is too expensive for folks to participate in out here on the margins. And so we're going to be left in these communities picking up the slack and helping kids, whether it's starting up homeschooling or anything that we can. If we have a single mom who's got one car and she's got to get to work and she's got a kid with a 45-minute bus ride on both sides, when the resources shrink and move closer to the center of the district, it leaves us out in the cold. And so I just want to make sure that if we go along with this idea of moving to Rumney, that we're not in the exact same situation next year with the same cuts to the smallest school. Which if there was a 12% cut across the board at all the schools and they all shared in the decline, I'd have a completely different outlook on this. But I don't think that the way it was done this year is effective for the long term.
I think one thing that you can see in our budget is we did cut, like when you look at the major categories, most major categories had a decline in spending. I mean, we looked at where and how can we cut? But I mean, we don't have additional funds. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of it. And personnel is 80% of our budget. And so when we look at how do we reduce our overall cost, personnel is one of those places. Creating more efficient classrooms and services for our kids helps us keep our personnel in line. I think the comment about like having a full-time nurse for a school that has more kids in it means that we don't have to try to provide full-time nurses at 2 schools. Those are savings, excuse me, those are savings that we can find in the budget. And so those are the kinds of things we look for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, specifically, when I look at what I lovingly call the nightmare scenario for Doty in the 5-school model, I am concerned about the math program for a multi-age. I taught multi-age for many years. I love teaching multi-age, and I think it's preferable to single grade teaching, frankly. But teaching math when the math program doesn't line up between grades. So you're doing one unit in 3rd grade and a totally different, you can't, a classroom teacher can't effectively do that. And I don't think, I'm just curious. I feel like if the no vote wins in Worcester, and I think a lot of other people would insist that you figure out how to have a second math teacher available in some capacity here at Doty.
I've heard that issue, and I appreciate it. I think one of the things that's hard to do, and this is not speaking, I don't want this to come across as speaking ill of any teacher in the work they do, but this is the kind of the cold hard. This teacher would only be teaching about 25 kids total. So to have a full-time teacher doing math for 25 kids is a very difficult thing for us to employ. And so I think the supports that we want to try to figure out is if we were maintaining Doty classrooms, multi-grade classrooms, is how do we support the teacher in being able to provide that multi-level instruction. I don't know that that's necessarily a person that's here doing that work, but that's the work that we have to do, most definitely.
Well, I've been looking into other small schools that have comparable situations, and they find ways. I mean, one had a principal teaching a math class and maybe a guidance. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to be a math teacher in elementary school, or perhaps you don't have a math program that is required, as my friend Tom Beach and I used to say. It felt like sometimes you were trying to teacher-proof the programs that we had to use such and such a math program, even if we didn't feel it was the best thing. So I don't know what the options are. I just know that if I were a parent of a kid planning to be at Doty next year, I would want there to be a good plan for how to have it be that both grades get good math instruction and it doesn't take up half the day doing math. There's a lot more that we want to be doing with our kids.
Agreed. And I would say that it's not a Doty-specific problem if we're 5 elementary schools next year. We will run into some of those same issue with some of our classrooms at East Montpelier as well because of the grade level configurations that we have. We will have to be devoting more time to just doing math instruction instead of doing intervention services. So it's not a problem that's unique to Doty. It's a problem that looks different depending on the school. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, and we know that those are the things that we have to plan for, should we be a 5-school.
Well, yeah, I mean, we need to be creative in all sorts of ways, and hopefully that's positive, actually, not negative. So yeah.
That's the goal.
Go ahead, Lisa. Just, can you vote? Thanks. Oh. Go ahead.
Just as an educator at Rumney and I have a Doty graduate, my son, wondering what you're hearing from Worcester families that would make a difference in showing them that we would welcome them in, because we're these 2 neighboring communities, and it's so sad to think that old ideas of divisions are keeping people from moving forward with something that could benefit both communities. Are you hearing any theme something that would make a difference?
I heard positively that, the open house, we did those at both East Montpelier for Calais and at Rumney for the Worcester community. And my understanding is the people who attended felt, excuse me,
Yes.
felt welcomed and appreciated that. And I think that we just have to do more of those activities. Should we move the vote through, is having opportunities for our kids to be together, our families to be together, our communities to be together. And I think another thing that we need to stress in our transition is that we want to make sure that we preserve our traditions at our schools that need to continue, right? And so we want to make sure that our kids and our families are able to voice that in a way, and for us as a district to honor that there are traditions that we need to make sure that we uphold. And so I think those are the things that we're really looking for.
I wonder how to help families hear that, and I think I speak for staff at Rumney, that there's a lot of staff from Rumney here, that we want to continue traditions and to merge them and not absorb Doty. And we're not that much bigger, and we're next door neighbors. So, I don't know. Yeah, love to know if there's anything else we can do.
Thank you, Sharon. I think Lisa has had her hand up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
can I make a comment or answer or something? Thank you for coming. I was one of the families, as a community member, I was one of the families that went to the open house, and it was wonderful, and I was just so grateful for all the staff and how welcoming everyone was. I was dismayed at the low turnout on the Worcester side, so I have thought about what could help. I agree, more intermingling, and I know Matt Pelkey wrote a really great Front Porch Forum post that was posted in Worcester that I thought was really powerful, so if there are people that are compelled to do something like that, I think it would be great. I also think, the communication about the open house came from our principal here. I think maybe a more direct invitation from Caroline next time might be welcoming too. So just kind of doing more together. But I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Michael, and thank you, Sharon, for sharing that. Go ahead, Lisa.
My name is Lisa Hanna. I'm a parent here in Worcester. I also taught at Doty for 10 years. I've been away now for 4. And I have a question, but I have 2 quick responses in relation to Dell and Sharon. So I'll just say when I was hired here at Doty, I was actually hired under the premise that multi-age math was a thing we did in the district, which was a little deceptive. It wasn't any of you, but like it wasn't, sorry, is the mic still working? It wasn't something that we did, and myself and my colleague who were hired at the time, it was incredibly challenging, and it did a disservice to students. And so as a parent, that is a big concern of mine, and also a reason, one of a variety of reasons, but a reason that I personally want my kid going to a school that is able to be adequately resourced to give them the opportunities that they need, including math instruction. And I personally don't, I understand the budget constraints, and so I'm worried that that won't be provided. And I think as much support as we can give to an individual teacher in a multi-age classroom to teach 2 grades of math, my personal experience, I would say, and it sounds like Dell's personal experience, and others, is that it's not a great model. So I hear you, Dell. And for me, that's had me land with a kid that I want them in a place where they're able to have that. And in response to Sharon, I will just say, as a parent of kids in this school, there are a lot of parents who actually, I have kids who have participated in sports over the years, and that's a way that they've connected with families and students from Middlesex, and we have felt nothing but supported. And I know there is a long, complicated history, and when I came on board as a teacher here, I heard a lot about that history between Middlesex and Worcester, and as a parent, I have only experienced welcoming vibes. And I know there was the open house, but also before that, there was organized by the PTNO, a movie night that many Worcester families showed up to. And I agree that more, and Stephen, I think even if this vote doesn't go through, let's do more, because our communities are still connected. And that's not in rebuttal to you, but I think like it's, our kids play sports together, our kids do things together already, and they go to U32 together. And I know parents at Rumney and myself on the sidelines have talked about that. Like, no matter what, why aren't we doing more? We should do more. And so those are my 2 responses. And my question is, right, I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and I know you can't plan for everything, but we also know we have to think about the contingency of this being voted down and there being 5 schools. And I think what we know is that if there are 5 schools, that Doty will be a 1st through 6th grade school next year, right? Our incoming class of kindergarten is too small, and they will be combined somewhere. And then I think what I know is that you all have made a commitment to have 6th grade move to U32 the following year. And so my question is, what does Doty look like in 2027 and 28? If it is a 1st through 5th grade, what does that look like for our kids here too? And again, I don't necessarily expect you to have the answer, but I'm proposing it to you and the community, but also like.
Right. I will say on the record, obviously, is that I think we have to revisit that decision. Should we not be 3 schools? Because we could create at that point in time 3 schools. If the 6th grade were to be moved up and we have 5 elementary schools, we could end up creating 3 schools that were all too small at that point in time. And so I think that there are other considerations that we have to have. We're also going to have to continue to have a conversation, particularly here at Doty, is we don't have very many kids at the pre-K level, kindergarten and pre-K levels, and so we're going to run into situations where even the 1st and 2nd grade classes don't meet minimum state standards as set by Act 73, and so we'll have to look at other options. If we are 5 schools, we're going to have to reevaluate yet again how we resource and whether or not we do move the 6th grade. I think it's a valid question. Yeah.
Volunteering. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. So I'm Nebula LeClaire, and I want to talk about Dodie moving to Rumney. So it is breaking my heart to see Dodie slowly fade, so please let us move to Rumney. This is for a good new experience, this is for Dodie, and this is for my friends. I have learned so much at Dodie, but now I would love to go to Rumney to learn more there. And yeah, that's all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
You bring up a great point that you didn't quite say, but I think is important for us to say over and over again. This is not a question of quality of teaching, quality of learning. We have 5 great schools filled with smart kids and filled with great teachers. And I think that sometimes it may feel like we're saying that that's not true, but the good news is that no matter where we go in our district, we have good kids and we have good teachers. And so that's what makes us a really strong district. And so I'm glad that you see that you can go there. And I just also want to say that we won't be calling it Rumney when you get there. We're going to come up with a new name that encompasses the new school. And so I think that that's something that we can look forward to as well. Thank you.
And you guys are going to come up with the new name, not us.
Yeah, absolutely.
The community is going to come up with the new name. But it's wonderful to hear our students and that, that hope for the future and us being one community. And that's sort of the promise of public education, right? Having thriving communities, thriving public schools that serve, regardless of socioeconomics, gender, or anything, that serve all of our kids. So thank you for being the future.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vivian. So I have a question about if we do move to Rumney. I love all the teachers here, and I just want to know what will happen to them if we do move to Rumney.
So what we're going to do is if the vote is to close the schools, we're going to survey all of our teachers, all elementary school teachers in the district and staff, and ask them what is their preference. So we want to hear from them because most of them, I assume, are going to want to be where their kids are that they're currently teaching. But we want to make sure that we hear from them as well. And what we want to make sure is that in any school that is, Rumney, if there are kids there from Dodie, which there will be, we want to make sure that they see teachers and staff that they've seen before. And so I'm not going to say it'll be everybody, right, because somebody may choose something different, but I will say that we're going to try to make sure that there are familiar faces for all of our kids in any of the buildings.
And but I love Gillian, and I know there's a principal at Rumney. Will we have 2 principals if Gillian decides to still stay?
So those are harder conversations for us to have. We won't have 2 principals at Rumney, but we will have conversations with our current principals about how we're going to structure the school. I'm not going to tell you that I know which one's going to be there, but I do want you to know that we will have conversations about that. And I'm glad you like Gillian. She's a good person.
Yes. Hi, I am Winter, and I just wanted to ask if we move to Rumney next year, would all of Dodie traditions be no longer happen, or would it all be, or would we have some of the traditions still be alive in Rumney?
I think that is exactly what we want to do, is we want to make sure that the traditions from Dodie and the traditions from Rumney get combined together so that we're doing both the things that we really enjoy from both. And I'm sure that there are things that you do in common that you may not know about that are traditions there that are traditions here. And so we're going to make sure that we combine those. And one of the things we want to capture from all of our kids in our community are what are those important things. So I can tell you one that I hear all the time that we're going to have to figure out how it works is the community lunch, right? So we know that that's important, and so that's something that we have to keep in mind and make sure, how do we do that?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you. You have helpers.
Yeah.
They say always look for the helpers.
If the school closes, I have a big concern about what will happen to the building.
Yeah, I think, so we've committed to not not trying to sell the building initially. That's a decision that's further down the road for our board. I personally, as a superintendent, would like to find, are there other educational uses that we can have for it in addition to some of the community possibilities as well? So what are things that the community might need this building for? The district is going to keep both of them for right now because we do feel like there are some uses that we might have. And I would just say that if the board in the future decides that it wants to sell the building, the town is not required to buy it, right? It's given the first option if it wants to buy it. Yeah, for $1.
Yeah.
And so, we can't force the town to take the building in the future, but I will also say that there are other options that we would like to look at. Can we use this building for some additional programs, maybe special education programs, some other programs? I know Callis, we might be able to use for some career center programs that the career technical education needs some space. So we're trying to look and see, can we use those buildings for other purposes before we try to sell them?
I have another question.
If it's a cost issue, there's no cost to the town if the school closes. The only way there would be a cost to the town for the school is if the school was offered to the town and the town purchased it for $1. At that point, the cost of upkeep, insuring, heating, lighting, everything like that would then be the town's responsibility as the owner. But until that happens and the district maintains ownership, we're responsible for any cost associated with the town. And you already heard Stephen talk about, we have some money in the budget to maintain custodial staff for the upkeep of the building and also maintaining community access to the building for like basketball or things like that. So just again, I know that's been a great concern about the cost of the building if it closes. That town will have no responsibility for that until it is offered to the town and the town decides to purchase it, if they ever do. If they don't, then the town would never have any fiscal responsibility for maintaining this structure. And Suzanne, correct me if I've misstated any of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Gillian. I was going to see if one of our young student helpers can, oh, here he comes, Paul. Hey, you right here. Okay.
Oh.
And then Noah.
Sorry, lost track of where
Is this building encumbrance-free?
Yes.
Yes.
It's not subject to the entire district debt?
The debt that came with the individual towns, 3 towns brought debt, that's attached to the building, it's not attached to the district. And the way the articles read is that if there was an encumbrance, it would, go with the building, but it's not, there's no debt on this building, as I know right now.
No, there's not.
Even though there's been capital improvements over time, it's not a debt to the town.
Daniel?
Yeah, and capital improvements was what I wanted to emphasize. Over the 7 now years of this district, the district has invested literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in both Callis Elementary School and Doty, and continues to and will continue to as long as they are our assets to protect. The buildings have to be in good repair for whatever use.
Noah?
Thank you. I was originally going to ask the same question about the building, but that's been asked. So I guess, some people have asked me why I changed my mind because I was such a strong proponent for keeping Doty open. And the reason is because the numbers changed, because we don't seem to have enough children to run a robust school anymore. And I really want a good education for all of our children. My question is, as these numbers decline, you'd mentioned, for example, that even our combined grades may not, or even next year will not meet the EQS standards, such as the 1-2 next year. I think maybe we'll have 11 kids, maybe
Yeah, I think it's the year after where that
I
would
think
be.
next year, 1-2 will have 11 children.
I think it's okay next year. I think it's
Could be wrong. Okay, so my
That's okay.
question is sort of, if classes in the future are getting smaller and smaller, but the town votes to keep Doty open, what happens to those combined classes? Meaning, is there a limit to, if you're going to have a combined class of 9 students, does that combined class get to stay at Doty, or would they have to move to Rumney as well?
So I think just right now, we're being very open that the pre-K and K are too small to maintain here at Doty, and those will be at Rumney next year, regardless of configuration of the schools. I think that each year, we're going to have to make that decision once we start getting into a situation where if classes were to drop to that level, we would have to make decisions about where is it best to educate those students. We have been doing kind of a back and forth here between Doty and Rumney last year, and then next year we're saying we're going to keep both over at Rumney. So I will say that it probably will be an issue where if our classes get too small, we have to combine them anyway. And so, so there would just be fewer and fewer kids in this building, both grade level and number.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask if there's any questions online, and then I'll go to you, Alan. Anybody online that wants to raise their hand? Okay, seeing none. Alan? Thank you, Gillian, for running the mic.
Hi, my name is Alan Gilbert. Let me start over. I think we can all agree that the next several years, maybe even 10 years, of what's going to be happening in education in Vermont is going to be roiling. It's going to be just completely different than what we have now. I think that by closing a school at this point, you're putting kids at the top of a high ladder, and they're going to go down a big chute, and they're not going to know where they're going to land, and it's going to happen possibly the next year, and maybe the next year after that, and who knows how long. Because as you've pointed out, there are a lot of variables that could change in the future, and we really don't know how this is all going to work. Did you at any time consider putting a pass for this year on closing the school, so maybe next year you'd have a better sense of how this broader system is going to work? I have a sense that you haven't been able to look ahead. You've been looking behind at how things have happened in the past and what you think you have to do to change those things. And I don't think we're going to have the past much longer. I don't know what the future is about how schools are going to be put together, but I really don't think that this is the year to close schools and be moving kids around when we have no idea what's going to happen in the legislature. It just doesn't seem like a good idea.
Alan, I'm just going to, and then I'm going to pass it to Daniel. I think one thing that we've been saying constantly as a board is that we're not doing this because of Act 73, right? We're doing this despite Act 73 because we have intentionally been planning what we want for our kids as communities. And if we go back to what Stephen was presenting on the slides, we started with the core beliefs, we move into the strategic plan as a community, and I know I see you rolling your eyes, but for real, and it's just like really based on what we want as a community for the future of our kids. And when I say community, is I see us all as one community within all of our communities. So we are doing this deliberately, and I know that is hard and sometimes misunderstood, but what we're hoping is to plan together for the future of all our children in our district. So it's looking at the future, not looking at the back. With the resources that we have, how can we best serve all of our students? We brought in, really intentionally bringing community schools into our district, not because we were doing all this work, but we wanted to bring some oxygen into the system, and with the understanding that we enroll not just students, but we enroll families, right? So we are all together, and in that promise that you worked so hard to do for Act 60, that's exactly what we're trying to do, give that promise of true public education to all of our kids in this district. So it is looking at the future. We might not have control of what they're going to do for Act 73, but this sets us in a sustainable path to be able to withstand, the potential 2% cap that they're talking about, or that it gives us a little bit more of a solid foot to stand on as a community together, have a little control of our future. So that's what I would say to that. Daniel? Oh, and the kids.
I don't mean to have an argument back and forth, Flora, but I don't think in 5 years there's going to be a Washington Central district anymore. I mean, that's what I mean by looking backwards. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the way education gets developed is going to be so different in so many ways, and the whole idea of the districts as we have them now, people are going to say, what was it like when you had these things called districts? I just think that we have to look ahead because we're being pushed by things that are happening in our world, changing. And I'm just afraid that taking something as small as closing one small school and sort of taking the kids to another place, and maybe they'll have to do another place the next year and so forth, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think we're going to be much bigger places in a few years, and it could be that people in Worcester or people in Berlin are going to an elementary school that they particularly like because there's a lot of reading that goes on there, and it's a reading K-4 school. There are all sorts of things that could happen, and somehow we all seem stuck in the way we've always done things, and we're not figuring out better ways to help kids move ahead and get the educations they want. And we're spending a lot of money doing it. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with that. So this is just really a tough year, and I think it's not the time to throw kids up to the top of the ladder. Let me put it that way.
Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what you said, Alan. I think for me, this is a good idea with or without Act 73. I think, we weren't thinking about Act 73 when we started thinking about our strategic plan, which asked us to put together a sensible reconfiguration. And it's true that there's a lot of uncertainty ahead, and putting our head in the sand is also not a solution. I don't think Keely's here, maybe she's online, but Keely has pointed out on multiple occasions that the status quo is not going to stick around, and to pretend that we can maintain things as they are is a fallacy as well. And I think I also was thinking about what Sophia said in her critique of our work earlier, and her ask that we emphasize community impact. And one of the things I've been really scared about this whole process is an involuntary consolidation. Our articles of agreement insist that towns be given, the voice in this process. I think community impact would almost certainly be adversely affected. Community well-being would be adversely affected if a school were to close against the will of everyone in that town. And it really requires the will of people to be a part of this process. That's what we're asking for. And if we look at the direction things are going, the direction that Act 73 is asking the state to go, agree or disagree, we might not know when we'll get there and exactly what it'll look like, but I think the direction that it's pointing the state in is pretty clear, and that's also the direction we're headed in with this reconfiguration.
We've had a couple of kids who are basically jumping out of their seats. I want to see if they...
Yeah,
I have another thing to say, one more question. So, if we do move to Romney, I know that we might like move the teachers around, but would we get like total new teachers, or would we just like move around and keep the teachers that we have at Doty and Romney?
So I don't know exactly, so I don't want to make big promises, but we are going to make sure that that you see teachers that you know when you're there. We're not going to hire new teachers from outside the district. It's going to still be our teachers, and they're going to be the ones who kind of say where would they like to be, and then we're going to try to put them there. And so that's what we're going to try to do. But it's not going to be like new people that we've never seen before.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I have two really quick questions. When, if we do move to Rumney and this building, whatever happens to it, if we do decide to like keep it with the district, will the town get to like vote or like decide something on what it would be, or if we keep it, or if we do, we'll like sell it or something?
So I think the town definitely will be a part of any decision on what we do with this building in the future. And so we're not going to force the town to take it, but we are going to make sure that we work with the town to use it in the right ways.
Okay.
And get several, thank you.
So there were three questions in a line here, so I'm going to start here and then I'll pan away.
This isn't a specific question. I wanted to speak about my personal experience in terms of this not being really about Act 73. I have 3 kids. I'm from Middlesex. My kids go to Rumney. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I've been paying close attention to the school board for 7, maybe 8 years. And for people who are saying like, why this year? This has been a conversation for so many years. I've been waiting for this. I see it. So the lack of stability is really hard. And I've seen lowering enrollment personally in our lives, in my kids' lives. What Rumney looked like in 2018 when my daughter started preschool is entirely different from what Rumney looks like now. Because we've been experiencing the same issues in increasing healthcare costs. It's so much more expensive. My daughter came home sicker than I've ever seen. She should have been in the ER because it was a day without a nurse last year. That would never have happened in 2018. We had 2 pre-K cohorts. I mean, there was so much, and it looked so different. And the flip-flopping, because we have such low enrollment between, there was a year where kindergarten was at Doty, pre-K was at Rumney. That's so hard. So I see, it's really not. I mean, Act 73 is a complicating factor, but personally for me and for my kids who are totally intertwined with Doty, I mean, their basketball team is called Dumney. They love it. They think it's so funny. I see it as greater stability and greater strength to endure what is coming, which is totally uncertain. I see that combination, being able to have a few more kids, both socially, emotionally, in terms of, what are our sports teams going to look like? Is anybody else as frustrated as I am? They have to combine it in different ways every single year. Do the girls get a team? No. There's only 3 girls in 5th and 6th grade who play basketball at Rumney, so they play on the boys' team. It's going great. The coach is amazing. But where is it going to be? How are they going to combine? There's a basketball team that's Rumney Doty Callis because there aren't enough kids, and it's different every year. And that's really hard. It's really hard for planning. So when we talk about like the single mom who has a kid, I'm like, if it's a regional school, but a stable one, that would be huge. It is so hard to plan. And it's really hard that my 11-year-old in preschool is going to have an entirely different experience from my rising pre-K 3-year-old, because it's so unstable. And the enrollment and what's possible has just faded every single year. So for me, this is not a sudden thing. This is not because of Act 73. This is a chance to actually stabilize our communities. Anyway, I don't have a question, but I just think that's my experience.
Okay, so it's the mic. I also want to just give us a chance to, as people are pacing their questions, that we have about 10 minutes. We can extend it a little bit more, but we had hoped to finish around 6:30.
Sounds good. I didn't prepare anything when I came here. Ryan Humke from Worcester. My kids are grown and out of the house now. And I've got one quick question before I give up the mic, and I've got three more questions. I'm curious, how did our Worcester representatives vote in terms of like, should Worcester and Calais vote on closing the schools or not?
Two of us voted against the move to close, and one voted in favor.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Because I hear this like, we're all one big community, but then we also are a Worcester community, and those are two very different things. Just like we're all one country, but I mean, like you can, okay. Roxbury, I've got friends in Roxbury. The word on the street is that Montpelier voted to close Roxbury, not the Roxbury citizens. They did not want it closed. They were forced to close it because there's more people in Montpelier. So they were kind of forced into closing it. I do have three more questions. I'm trying to paint the context a little bit, though. We moved here about 25 years ago. Grew up, both of us, in suburbia. We were looking for something special. We were looking for community that was small, looking for personality, not looking for like conveniences and Starbucks and Home Depots and all that. We found it in Worcester. I mean, absolutely found it in Worcester. I used to come over here on Saturdays and we would play around. We would play in the gym, whole bunch of kids, dozen kids would play. Some principals encouraged that. Some principals said, no, we can't do that. That's against policy. So we've experienced a lot of inconsistency in leadership here at the school. There's been like, yes, volunteerism is embraced. There's also like a lack of encouragement sometimes by bringing volunteers in. There's an amazing amount of wise elders in our community with the free time to volunteer, with the experience as well. So I would encourage, however this goes in the future, like, let's get people volunteering. The news article I read by UVM, 3 people from UVM, like the conclusion was, we're not sure how it's going to affect property taxes, consolidation, this sort of thing. But one thing they seemed to agree on was civic engagement decreased in towns that lost their elementary school. One of the coolest things I've experienced living in a small town, from town meeting day to, starting up a local newspaper that did awesome and then crashed and without people to run it, a PT&O that was awesome and vibrant, and then I don't know where it is today. But it requires civic engagement. So meetings like this, they give us an opportunity to come out and get to talk, get to listen. This is a tough decision because I think, and all tough decisions are tough when there's pros and cons on both sides. If we go to a 3-school model, I'm sure it'll be awesome. If we stay with a 5-school model, I think it'll be awesome. And there's going to be cons for both situations. So, as a teacher, I know that kids spend 40% of their waking hours at school. We're kind of asking teachers to be their parents away from the home. That's a big ask. I think it does cost money. I think every job interview I've gone to, there's tons of teachers lined up ready to take that spot. So I don't think I buy the dwindling staff argument. There's always going to be teachers, but we do need to pay them more if we want great teachers, period. I'll get to my questions now. Ultimately, I know, sorry, bear with me. I wrote a ton of stuff down, I apologize. Ultimately, I want a vibrant, multi-age community. That doesn't happen when young families aren't bringing their kids to town like we did 25 years ago to enroll in an elementary school. I would say, could Rumney bring their preschool and their kindergartners over here to our school to fill up our school? Sounds like we're going to be maintaining 2 schools, 5 schools anyway, even if there are no schools, kids here. So it can flow both ways. All right, here are my questions. There's been a lot of building arguments on population decline. I also hear things like, we don't know what the kindergarten and pre-K population's going to be in the future because, I mean, literally young families move in and now you've got pre-K or kindergarten. So where does, and I think Noah, you probably know more about this than I do, but maybe we can paint like, how do we know 10 years from now there's going to be no kids in Worcester? Because 25 years ago, we were around 60, 65 kids in this building, and I think we've got 57 this year. That's pretty close, not a huge decline. I'm not convinced 10 years, 25 years in the future, we're going to, but convince me. You've done more research than I have. So that's one question, population decline, convince me. The other question is, not as important anymore. Let's prioritize. And yeah, the idea of a teaching principal here to help save on whatever, you know, I know an individual I work with taught 5 years in a rural school. I know Gillian's an amazing teacher. I have so much respect for all of you. I've worked with many of you, and I really appreciate all the time that you've put in on this, but I would absolutely trust, you know, Gillian to teach any of these kids here. You do every day, I'm sure, but, you know, as a math teacher or ELA teacher. So, like, there are a lot of ways, I think, where we can save money. Nobody wants higher property taxes, but I don't hear any talk about saving property taxes. So it's all about, like, what's best for the kids. We all want what's best for the kids in 10, 25 years, not just next year. Thank you.
So I'll get the other questions, and then I might hit, I'll hit those. So
could you hit the ones I asked?
So quickly, one of the things that we use is the NESDEC, is the reports that we get on what does student population look like. They have statistical models that are pretty accurate as to what birth rates look like. So I can say, because I know it off the top of my head, is East Montpelier's birth rate was changed just 2 years ago from 18 kids a year to 12. So in one cycle of the data, they cut 30% of the birth rate. We're looking at having 2 or 3 kids a year right now here in Worcester as part of our birth rate, and that's just not enough to sustain the school long term. So most of the formulas that they use also try to take into account what's the growth, population growth, you know, age-wise and all that. It doesn't show Vermont right now is an aging population. It continues to age. And it doesn't show a large number of people moving into this state, particularly into the rural areas that are younger and have children. And so we can only go by that because I don't know in 5 years who's going to be here, but the data tends to hold up over the years with this organization. And then the other one is, yeah, we're looking for every opportunity for people to do multiple jobs when they can do multiple jobs, because that does help us save money and helps keep good people. So I appreciate that.
I'm going to let Zach do a quick comment.
Yeah, just one quick other comment on the population projections. It's not just the NESDEC projections. We've also looked at things like reporting from the town clerk, so like from the town reports. You know, the numbers from the number of children being born in town very, very, very closely ties to those, to you know, who shows up in the schools. There's a little in, little out, but on net, it's, you know, it's almost right there. And what we're looking at from the town, from just the actual births in town, is that 3-4 kids a year.
Julia, do you have a comment? Is there something you wanted to say? Okay, go ahead. And then there was one more question in the back. I'm going to go in the front and then you. So go ahead and then.
I have a very specific question. It has to do with our counselors, interventionists, specifically the numbers in your grids of the staffing that's attached in your documents, and also this LTWADM, and maybe that is related. But I'm trying to understand how the staffing was made up once you combine Doty and Rumney and Calais and East Montpelier. And so, for example, on the school counselors, Doty has 0.8 right now, and Rumney has 0.1. So if we add those together, we get 0.18. 1.8, sorry.
We have 1.8, yeah.
1.8, right?
Currently.
Yeah, and then Calais has 0.18, and East Montpelier has 1, but when we add those together, we get 2.
So we opted, when the principals were putting together the budgets of the combined schools, one of the things that they looked for is additional intervention support for functional skills for our students, and decided that having an additional school counselor to be able to do that work was the way that they would like to provide those interventions. And so we opted to keep more than one school counselor right now at our elementary schools so that they could provide that kind of intervention for our kids. And so that was a decision made by our principals about how they wanted to spend money.
Okay, and then Berlin has 1, but they're going to get 2. So I'm just saying that the schools that we're impacting, that we are combining together, I think we're going to need more counseling and more intervention, and I'm seeing less. And so on the intervention side, and this specifically goes to what I think is a class issue and a concerning issue for me, for my kid next year, again, is the schools that you're combining Doty and Rumney, their interventionist is going to stay the same as it is today. It's actually going to decrease. There's 2 interventionists here at this particular school that we're sitting in tonight. There's 2 interventionists here. When they go up the hill, there's still only going to be 2 interventionists in that combined school. And you're going to have all these kids at Doty hogging up the services up there. And I think that's going to impact the vibe up there when we get all these kids going up the hill and you've still got the same amount of interventionists currently. I think it's going to be a major problem, because how Rumney's going to end up getting less of the attention because Doty's going to need more of the attention, but you've still got only the same amount of interventionists.
So I think Gillian can speak to it better than I can.
And I'm gonna add one more question onto that. The long-term, whatever that's called, long-term weighted average daily membership, my understanding from what I've read this past 2 weeks, in this very school, we are weighted more than other schools. So we get more money based on our socioeconomic or educational needs. So when we go up the hill, and my son is now in a class of 20 sixth graders instead of 10 that he's in here, how does that more money that Doty gets, I'm very curious about this, how does it not get diluted once it gets up into that classroom of 20? Because we had more attention on our 10 children now, and now our 10 children go up the hill. I understand that LTWADM follows them, but it's one teacher. That teacher's not going to be like, okay, I'm going to spend more time with you because you actually brought more money up the hill than this other person that was already here. How does that work? I'm totally honestly curious. And that goes similarly to my point about the interventionists and the counselors.
Yeah, I think Gillian's going to be able to address some of that. You did.
Do you want to take the LTWADM question?
So what the LTWADM allows us to do when there's a higher need within a school, I mean, I understand you're talking about the ratio of kids to the teacher, but it also allows for the additional services too. So if we do need that interventionist, if we do need a school nurse, the school counselor and all that, those funds go to fund that as well. There's also some Title I money that is used for intervention as well, and I think that's where Gillian can help you with the number of interventionists that are here.
Right. So currently, we do not have 2 full-time interventionists. We have a math teacher who does approximately 0.3 of her FTE, I would say, is intervention. And what the combined budget doesn't show is it doesn't show the title funds. So there would actually be 3 interventionists up at the combined school in Rumney, because there would be the 2 local funded ones and the Title I funded interventionists. But when we're doing budgeting, I mean, in budgeting, we keep in back of our mind the federal funds, but we don't, it doesn't come out of all of the local funding, so it doesn't show up in the actual budget, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are actually 3 interventionists that will be there. And our interventionists can also work with more kids when they're there. So the group, instead of it being 2 kids in a group, it can be 3 kids in a group. And so that helps us in terms of our staffing levels for our kids. So that's just more of a ratio piece. Yes. Yeah, so
Yeah, you need,
Yeah.
so that everybody can hear you. Yeah, and just, again, a little check on time.
Yeah, I'm going to do a time check, and Christy's been waiting patiently.
Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
come back and then.
I just wanted to speak as a Worcester resident, right? I had 2 kids graduate from this school. Like half these people in here taught my children, but I also want to speak as a Rumney staff member. I just wanted to thank the Worcester community that came over to our open house. We really appreciate it. We want you to feel welcome. We want you to know that we are human and that we love all children. And I think it's very important for the Worcester people to hear and the Worcester children to hear that we are going to carry on their traditions. They matter. Those kids are what matters. And I just want you to know that Rumney staff, our people, we do care, and our goal is to continue the Worcester traditions. Like, we don't want to take anything away from anybody, and I just wanted to stand up for my staff and to let you know that Rumney staff is amazing, just as amazing as Doty staff. We're all human.
Thank you. Okay.
One more in the back.
One more in the back, and then we have to bring it to a close. And there's another informational meeting on Saturday. This informational meeting is for all our communities. It doesn't have to be divided, so there will be additional time on Saturday. Go ahead. We have a question.
My name is Jennifer Chambers. I am wondering if you could talk to us more about Twinfield's interest in talking with our board. Timelines, just more information about that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we're at the very earliest stages. Twinfield reached out to us to discuss the possibilities of our districts merging. We have not had, the superintendent of that district and I have just started working on scheduling a time for our 2 boards to meet to discuss what are the interests that both boards hold. It is not something that will happen by next year. It will take some time for that. We don't know what their full interest is yet. We haven't had that conversation, just that they're interested in having some kind of conversation about what they can do and what we could do together. And so those will be we're looking to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. So we did a study with Montpelier earlier in this year to see what are some of the ways that we might have similar interests, that we might be interested in merging. Their board is not interested in this time at moving forward with that. I think some of it has to do with the way we're configured right now. They've been through a pretty hard configuration conversations with Roxbury. I think that they want to avoid our conversation for right now, but that there are future possibilities, right? Because we don't know what Act 73 is going to do around those kinds of district decisions.
Okay, and then I'm going to bring it to an end. Like I said, there's going to be more another chance for more questions in Calais at 2 to 3:30 at the Calais Elementary School on Saturday. So thank you for being here. And the last comment that I'll make is that every single member sitting in this board represents all of our communities, not their particular town. And the board stands together behind every decision that they make. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you on Saturday. If you have any other questions, we're going to move into our